Hey guys, Jeff Nelson here at slapitabass.com. Welcome back for the weekend bass lesson. Today we're going to talk about how to practice and how not to practice. I think this is a very important subject for bass players as well as any other instrument, because a lot of players get bogged down in practice and they actually end up hurting themselves more than they end up doing good. So today I'm going to give you 3 ways to practice and 3 ways not to practice that I think are very important. So the first thing I want to talk about is the metronome. A metronome is something that you definitely should use when you're practicing because it keeps the time for you and it allows you to practice all your musical passages up against a set tempo or beat. To find a metronome, you can either go to a music store, you can order one from online, or you can also find a program or app for your computer or smartphone that will act as a metronome for you. It's a very simple device that just plays a series of electronic beeps at a certain tempo. The major benefit to using the metronome is that it allows you to know when you're playing in time and when you're slowing down or speeding up. If you practice a lot without a metronome, don't expect to be in time whenever you go to sit in with a band, because you're going to have timing problems, I can almost guarantee you. The second thing I want to talk about that you should be doing when you practice is learning licks in all 12 keys. This is a fairly easy thing to do on the bass guitar because once you learn a pattern and a set of notes, it's going to be the same anywhere on the bass. For example, if I wanted to learn this lick in all 12 keys, I would just go up 1 fret each time, and just keep going up the neck, also go back down to the neck. Basically, I'm saying practice your licks everywhere on your entire bass guitar so that you gain muscle memory, because the frets up here further on the neck are closer together than they are down here when you're closer to your tuning pegs. So it's really essential to get a feel for the entire bass. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about that you should be doing when you're practicing is integrating different playing techniques and styles into your music. So let's take the same lick we used earlier. You can see there I'm finger picking. So another way I could play it is I can use a rest stroke. See, I'm cutting the notes off there. Or I can slap it. Or I can tap it. Or I can use plucks. Or I can use thumb picking. Basically, it's just important to learn a bunch of different styles because you want to look at these like tools in your tool belt. You may not always need all the playing styles, but you definitely need to know how to do them, so when you run across a piece of music that calls for it, you can just jump right on it and there's no problem. Okay, so now that I've talked about the things that we should be doing when we practice, let's talk about some things to avoid when we practice. The first thing that I want you guys to learn to avoid doing when you practice is a very common mistake that a lot of players make, and that is to try to play everything too fast. Like, it's going to be hard to grasp how to play something like that because you've never slowed it down and learned the fundamentals of how to do that. So to slow that lick down, you just play it, or even slower if you're just starting out. Or if that's too much, you just play the first 2 notes until you can do that and move on to and so on, and then you practice it over and over and speed it up gradually with the metronome, and that's another reason why the metronome's so important. Another very, very important thing not to do when you're practicing is to ignore the details. And by the details, I mean all the fine intricacies of music, such as dynamics and exact rhythms, and grace notes and hammer-ons and trills, etc. There's a lot of them. There's too many to name right now. So for instance, if I use a variation of the lick I've been using, some of the details you can notice there is that the first note was long and pronounced compared to the rest of the notes, which were shorter and more what you call staccato. Also, there was a dynamic change. I got quieter as I played that lick. For instance, a new player would play and think they were playing what I just played right. And they did play the right notes, but what they failed to do was to take into consideration the dynamics and the exact note lengths that I used. Here it is again. And is a huge difference. And the final and probably most important thing not to do when you practice is to keep ramming your head in the wall and get frustrated and mad and just get more and more angry at the lick you're trying to play. Because all this is going to accomplish is you're going to try to play it too hard, and you're going to forget what you're doing. You're going to forget the intricacies of what you're doing, which is what we just talked about. And you're going to end up actually hurting your playing rather than improving your playing. So when you run into a piece of music that's just giving you absolute fits to learn, I'm not saying to stop trying to learn it. What I'm saying to do is, if you find yourself getting angry and aggravated in practice, just take a step away from it. Walk outside, take a walk, get a drink of water, think about it, think about what you could be doing wrong, and then start practicing again. Then try listening to it again. Sometimes you miss something the first time, or the second time, or the third time. Sometimes you miss one of those little intricacies that I was talking about, and whenever you figure out that that's what you were missing, everything just clicks together. And trust me, I know practicing gets aggravated sometimes. I've destroyed instruments, I've thrown things, I've done things I'm not proud of. But in the end, what I had to do was I had to step out of the room, go think about it, and do exactly what I just told you guys to do. Alright, that's it for today, guys. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow the link in the description, and remember to slap at the bass.